Bienvenidos a Venezuela. Welcome to Venezuela. Venezuela is a Spanish-speaking country located on the northern coast of South America. It is about twice the size of California. Most of its 28 million people live in urban areas, including the capital, Caracas, Maracaibo, and Valencia.
Venezuela is fairly developed compared to most of Latin America. There's about one cell phone per person. However, only 1/3 of the population has internet access. Venezuela is the 5th largest oil exporter in OPEC. The economy is based largely on oil exports. Consequently, the country's economy fluctuates with oil prices and is fairly unstable. Hugo Chavez has been president of Venezuela since 1999. He calls his political stance 21st century socialism. As part of this standpoint, he nationalized the petroleum industry, which accounts for 95% of Venezuela's exports. Popular opinion of Chavez is intimately tied to the success of the petroleum industry. He is opposed to Western ideals, specifically imperialist capitalism.
For a world leader, Chavez is not afraid to say how he feels. According to The Telegraph, in October 2005, he accused the North American empire of being the biggest menace to our planet. Earlier that same year, he said that capitalism leads us straight to hell. Not only does he say how he feels, but he can broadcast it whenever he wants. He has a weekly television show, Allo Presidente. In one episode, he set the record for the longest political speech at 8 hours. He also gave himself the power to interrupt any radio program with his own segment, Chavez de repente, or Suddenly Chavez. There are 2 state-owned television channels, Venezolana de Televisión, VTV, and Vive.
De repente, pues, como las cosas ocurren de repente. Cuando usted oye un golpe de arpa tramado, pudiera ser Chávez de repente. Ajá, ese es Cristóbal Jiménez, ¿no?
Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Together, VTV and Vive have a 5% share of TV audiences in the country. Private channels hold the majority of the audience, while paid TV audiences, including cable and satellite, have been increasing over the last 10 years.
Outside of state-owned networks, Chavez still has an influence over television media. According to the Harvard International Review, in January 2010, Chavez ordered cable operators to stop carrying RCTV, a pro-opposition channel, because they wouldn't let him show his speeches live whenever he wanted. Students held protests against this order, but ultimately, the channel was shut down. One controversial issue in Venezuelan TV is the channel Telesur. Telesur, short for Television of the South, is a government-backed Pan-American channel that was launched in 2005 by Venezuela, Cuba, Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil. Support has grown to include 10 Latin American nations. Chavez's government originally provided 70% of the funding and still provides the majority.
The goal of this station is to provide a South American perspective that was previously absent in global television. Several American networks have a Spanish division that broadcasts to these countries, but backers of Telesur claim that these stations do not give adequate attention to Latin American voices. The station tries to distance itself from the countries that fund it. It is possible that, with a large enough audience, they can one day become commercially funded, but that has not yet happened. Chavez is a strong supporter of the program, so funding is secure as long as he remains in office. Telesur is available in between 3 and 5 million homes. In comparison, CNN has a regional audience of 13 million in Spanish and 4 million in English.
One strength of the station is that it has a wide news-gathering capacity due to its access to many countries in the region. A major challenge is that populations are not used to trusting state-sponsored news sources. Telesur tries to combat this negative perception in 2 ways. First, it is funded by several governments. Second, the station hires local reporters that have previously fought for media independence. Members of the United States government are concerned that Telesur may falsify news. 3 days before the station went live, Congressman Connie Mack proposed legislation that would require pro-U.S. broadcasts to be beamed to Venezuela. The amendment received bipartisan support. Representative Tom Lantos went so far as to say that Hugo Chavez is a menace in our hemisphere who wishes to disrupt our lives by the influence he has with his oil and by the arrangements he's made with Fidel Castro to potentially try to do harm to the United States through any means.
A 2007 content analysis examined Telesur election coverage in multiple member countries. In Nicaragua, Ecuador, and Brazil, there was a balanced amount of time for each candidate. In Venezuela, however, Chavez's opponent was given harsher treatment. Telesur also broke a national electoral rule by reporting exit poll results that Chavez had won by a large margin before the official results were announced. One possible reason was to discourage protests upon the official announcement. Telesur has been called a South American Al Jazeera, the Middle Eastern station that set a precedent for broadcast news sponsored by multiple governments. There are a number of similarities between the networks. Both stations are largely funded by oil-producing countries, aim to offer an alternative to media giants, and have been accused of having a political agenda. Al Jazeera has largely been successful because it is filling a gap in a market saturated by dull and biased state-sponsored media. However, Telesur faces a longer and more difficult road to success because the Latin American market is already saturated with private television stations. Hugo Chavez is a dominant personality in Venezuela who has an impact on multiple channels of communication. He is a confident and charismatic leader who was never afraid to state his beliefs loud enough for everyone to hear.